Hi, this is Rick. This is the first of many documents that we're going to talk about. This is a work request, commonly called a business case, depending on the organization that you work for. This is a document that starts the project off. This is the initial, hello, I think I've got a good idea kind of piece of paper. And this form is not inviolate. In other words, industries will change it. They'll have different needs for different information, and so as a consequence, they'll put different wording in there, or they'll have a different requirement for different numbers. It all depends on what they want to do with it and how they process their work requests. So this is the very first document. Let's go through this document block by block. So you'll notice it's divided into three large bold blocks. The first one is the administrative title of the project and things like that. The second one is a description of the project and justification for it. And the last one is the approval area. So let's start with the first block at the top, and we'll start with the title of the project. That's whatever you want to call it. In other words, you can say fabricate a new skateboard wheel, and that can be the title of it. Or of course, the request date would be the date that you handed in. The requester name would be you. And the requesting department is simply here to remind you that sometimes your business unit is part of a department that needs to approve this as well. So if you were in HR and it originated from there, or if you were in IT management, you need to put that there. It just depends on what department you're in. That's totally fictitious, so you need not put anything there. Of course, the requester phone number should be there for the business, but you need not put anything there. And you'll notice then that the last block in this is for office use, and that's where the project management office would actually give a number to this work request so that they had the ability to track through what happened and who put it in and things like that. So that's the first block. Second block is the justification for the project itself. So that starts off with a business need. What problem are we trying to solve? If we need a new server, what problem is that server going to solve? What is it going to do for the business? It's got to have some sort of problem that we're going to solve with it. So the whole idea is that there's got to be a justification. Now, the second block, project description, is what that solution is going to look like. So in the case of the skateboard wheel, it might be that we have to do a materials engineering. We might have to do mechanical engineering for the ball bearings. It just depends on how much you want to put in there. But the project description is how you're going to solve that business need that's in the first block. The next area is actually helping you to gather together the benefits. Most people can put together the costs very simply. They just know what it's going to cost to do these different things. But what are the benefits? And by the way, benefits need to be measurable. So at some point, these have got to have numbers in them. That's why there's a second column that says estimated benefits. So that's either a dollar reason or a reference of some kind. So as we go through here, this is the business value or the benefits section. So sometimes we just have to satisfy regulatory requirements. In other words, some safety reason says you must put a guard on that metal stamping machine, or workers must wear eye protection. That's a safety regulation that's demanded by OSHA or the state, and you're going to have to comply with that. The purpose of the project then would be to comply with regulatory requirements. Most projects, however, have an increase in revenue as their primary goal. So how are you going to make more money for the company? Of course, the easy way to justify that is to make sure that you know what the strategic plan is and what the vision statement of the company is. That really helps out. But in this particular case, you can either put words there, how it's going to increase the revenue, but it can also be an estimated amount. So how much are you going to increase? What is the productivity of this particular project? You can improve productivity as well. In other words, you can say we could do it this way if we wanted to make that skateboard wheel in a different way, and it might improve productivity or the way the product is made. Employees are a big part of the cost of a product. So in some cases, increasing retention is a big deal. So you may want to be able to, or you may want to put down how you're going to increase retention. Now, ideally, if you check one of these, you should be checking most of them so that the improved productivity actually increases your retention. People stick around longer because it's a better working place. or they see change that ensures their safety. So here again, in the estimated benefits side, in other words, the right side of that form, you're going to want to fill in how this increases retention. Support additional capacity may be something like if you air condition this particular space, productivity increases. Or if you add just 2 more feet, you can have this new machine installed in that particular area that will do this special finishing project on it. So that's supporting additional capacity. And here again, you're going to need to put down either words or numbers there. Improved competitiveness is a big deal. Now, you're not going to be able to do that very carefully because we're not going to do a market analysis, but in many cases, you can utilize your knowledge in that particular area to show how this improves the competitiveness, how you become more dominant in the market against your competitors. And of course, decrease expenses goes along with each one of these. So at that point, you're going to come up with a number or how you're going to decrease expenses. So this needs to be very specific. This area is going to expand, and the reason that there's just one line there is for the sake of space on the form, but when you actually put things in here, they need to expand to fill that area. This needs to be pretty extensive. This is the justification for it. Now, in the next block, you have information for the people that are actually going to make the decision. Most of them make it on the basis of the availability of resources and the vision of the company, but they also want to know the total cost of the project. This needs to be stated up front as best you can. Now, notice it says project estimates plus or minus 25%. That's a pretty wide swath. So you don't have to go out and do detailed analysis here. This is simply an idea that you came up with, so we don't have to go out there and spend a lot of time on it, looking up individual prices and summing things like that. But the idea is, what do you think the total cost would be? Plus or minus 25%. So you are going to have to look a little bit, but not a lot. Length of time the project will take in terms of days, weeks, months, or years. And this needs to be, again, plus or minus 25%. So you're going to have to be pretty accurate with this, but not do a lot of the detail work that we're going to get into later. The next one is ROI, that's return on investment. And if you look on page 49 in the 4th edition book, you'll find out that there's a whole explanation on how to calculate return on investment, and it's based on those benefits that we actually looked at before. So if you put numbers in those benefit areas, then you'll have the calculations ready for the return on investment, or the ROI. And the payback period also requires those benefits to be written down and the expenses to be written down. So that's going to be a time period, and it's going to be in terms of weeks or months or years that the project actually pays for itself. So you want to make sure that projects are not cost centers, they are profit centers. In the case of every project, there are constraints. There are things that are going to keep the project within bounds. So you may say that the project has to be done between June and September, because that's when we have the weather to be able to pour that's concrete or whatever we're going to do. So there's a constraint, a weather constraint. There may be a funding time constraint. There may be an employment constraint. The constraint is that we have the craftsmen necessary to actually do the engineering of the skateboard wheel. We're making some assumptions here as well. Now, constraints are negative things that keep the project from getting out of bounds, or things that actually keep us from completing the project well and on time. Whereas the assumptions are things that we say, okay, now we are actually assuming that the demand for skateboard wheels will increase in the next year. Or we're assuming, and that's a big assumption, so we're assuming that the weather will cooperate. We're assuming that we will not get hit by a hurricane or something like that. So the whole idea here is that, what are you assuming will go well? High-level risks have to do with that same thing. In other words, what is going to happen, what could happen that would pose a risk to this whole thing getting done? And that might be, there's an impending truckers strike that may keep delivery of your material. There may be an increase in fuel prices. So that's the project itself. That's what the committee is going to look at and say, okay, this is the idea, this is the raw idea, and that gives them enough information to be able to make the decision. The last part is simply the approval area, and you'll notice that we've got key stakeholders. Now, you may have to make up names here or put in names of people that you know and the departments that they're affiliated with, and that has to do with the different departments that will be involved in this thing. And then you've got the request sponsor. Now, this is the person that's actually going to fund the project. This is the one that steps forward and says, take it out of my budget. So this person has to be able to read this entire form and understand it and buy into it. So there's their name on the left, and the right is their signature. And of course, you can just make up a name and make up a signature. And then the last one is your name again and your signature at the bottom. That's the same as it was at the top. So that's the work request or the business case form that initiates a project.